Part 1. She had always been the quiet one in the classroom, the kind of student who never raised a hand unless someone directly asked her something. Most days, she slipped into her seat without making a sound and kept her eyes down so no one would think she wanted attention. To many teachers, she seemed like just another student who drifted through lessons without showing interest. They thought she didn't try, or maybe she didn't care. No one ever wondered if something else was going on behind that silence. Every morning she walked into school with her old backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder. She kept her steps soft so they wouldn't echo through the hallway. Some of her classmates didn't even notice her passing. Others noticed just enough to wonder why she hardly spoke. But she didn't mind being invisible. It made her feel safe, like no one expected anything from her. When people expected nothing, there was no pressure to prove herself in class. The teachers would sometimes call on her, hoping she would speak up. She would answer in a small, clear voice, just loud enough for them to hear. But the moment the question was over, she returned to silence. Over time, many teachers began thinking she lacked confidence or drive. A few even joked lightly about how she always looked lost during lessons. She heard the comments, but she never reacted. She didn't know how to explain that she simply liked staying quiet. When the school day ended, she walked home the same way, soft steps, quiet breathing, eyes focused on the path ahead. But once she reached her small home, the world changed. Inside the living room stood an old keyboard her family had kept for years. The keys were slightly faded, and a few buttons didn't work, but it was her favorite part of the house. Whenever she was alone, she sat in front of it and pressed the keys gently, letting the sounds fill the room. She had discovered the keyboard when she was much younger. At first, she played random notes, trying to understand how sound worked. But as years passed, she taught herself simple melodies. She watched free videos online and practiced them slowly, reading the same notes until they sounded clear. After some time, she didn't just play the melodies, she understood them. She learned how each note connected to the next, how tempo and rhythm changed the feeling of a song. She wasn't aware of how much progress she had made. She only knew she loved the sound of the keys and the calm it brought her. Late in the evenings, when the rest of the house grew quiet, she practiced the most. She would sit in the dim light of a small lamp, her fingers moving faster and faster as she repeated what she had learned. Sometimes she tried pieces far beyond her level, but she didn't get frustrated when she made mistakes. She simply tried again. No one in her home ever stopped her or questioned why she spent so much time playing. They thought it was just a hobby. None of them realized she had grown into someone with real talent. At school, no one connected her with music. They only saw her quietness. During music class, she never volunteered for anything. The teacher usually played a short tune and asked the students to clap the rhythm or sing along, but she always stayed silent. The teacher noticed her lack of participation and eventually assumed she wasn't interested. He didn't ask her to play any instruments, not even the simple ones like the tambourine or small drum. She didn't complain. In a way, she felt relieved. She wasn't ready to show anyone what she could do, but the truth was different. Whenever she listened to any melody, even a simple one, the notes formed something inside her. She could picture how each sound connected to another. She could imagine how it would feel under her fingers, even if she had never played it before. This was something no one around her knew. She didn't talk about it because she didn't think her ability was special. She thought anyone could do it if they practiced enough. One day during a break, a few students were talking loudly near her desk. They were discussing an upcoming event the school was planning. She didn't pay much attention at first, but when she heard the words perform and music, her heart beat a little faster. The students around her were excited, guessing what the teachers would ask them to do. Some laughed about how bad they were at singing. Others joked about forgetting lyrics, She listened quietly, wondering what would happen. Later that afternoon, the school announced that every student had to join the cultural event in some way. They could sing, dance, draw, or play an instrument. It didn't matter how simple the task was. Everyone had to participate. The announcement spread quickly through the classrooms. Students complained or cheered, depending on how confident they felt. But when she heard it, she froze. The music teacher walked into class the next day with a list. He said he would assign a small task to each student based on what they were comfortable with. When he reached her name, he looked up and gave a gentle smile, almost like he already expected what he would say. "You can do a simple piano melody," he said. "Something easy. Just a few notes. That should be fine for you." A few students looked at her and whispered. They assumed she would struggle, maybe even mess up on stage. The teacher's tone wasn't cruel, but it held the same misunderstanding she had experienced for years. He thought she had no talent. He thought all she could manage was the simplest task. She nodded quietly, not revealing anything. Inside, her heart raced not with fear, but with a strange spark she hadn't felt before. She knew she could do more than a simple melody. She knew she had practiced pieces far more advanced. But she didn't tell anyone. She kept her thoughts to herself as she walked home that day. Once she reached her house, she placed her bag on the table and sat at the old keyboard once again. She touched the keys softly, thinking about the event. She remembered how the teacher had spoken to her, how her classmates had reacted. She wasn't angry, but something inside her felt different this time. For the first time in her life, she wanted to show what she had been hiding for so long. She began practicing with more focus than usual. Instead of sticking to the simple melodies she had mastered, she opened a new piece she had been scared to try before. It was fast, emotional, and challenging. Her fingers stumbled many times, but she didn't stop. She continued practicing until her hands felt slightly tired, and her eyes felt heavy. Night after night, she practiced. She didn't tell her family about the event. She didn't talk about her performance at school. She didn't mention the simple melody she had been assigned. She kept everything inside and let her fingers speak instead. As the event day grew closer, her confidence slowly built. She wasn't nervous about playing. She was nervous about being seen, really seen, for the first time. She wondered how people would react. Would they be surprised? Would they doubt her? Would they finally understand she wasn't what they assumed she was? Despite all these questions, she continued practicing. Music had always been her safe place. And now, it was becoming something more. It was becoming her way to express everything she had kept hidden behind silence. By the final night before the event, she sat in front of the keyboard with calm hands. She played the entire piece without stopping, without stumbling. When she finished, the room felt still. She remained seated for a moment, breathing quietly. She didn't smile, but a soft warmth spread through her chest. She was ready. She didn't know what would happen the next day. She didn't know how people would react or what they would say. But for the first time in a long time, she felt a small sense of pride. Not because she wanted applause, but because she finally understood her own ability. She turned off the lamp, stood up, and walked away from the keyboard. Her steps were soft, just like they always were. But this time, they carried something new, something quiet yet powerful. Something no one at school had ever seen in her. Her hidden talent was no longer going to stay hidden. The next day, the world around her would finally hear what she had been keeping inside for years. Part 2. The days leading up to the school event moved slowly, yet each one felt heavier for her. Even though she didn't speak about it, she felt the quiet pressure inside her chest grow a little more every morning. At school, the atmosphere had changed. Students were practicing their parts loudly in the hallways, humming songs, rehearsing dance steps, or sharing ideas with each other. Everywhere she walked, she heard some type of excitement. But for her, the excitement mixed with nerves. She stayed in her seat during breaks, listening to the noise around her. Some students talked about how they prepared their songs by standing in front of mirrors at home. Others joked about getting their steps wrong during the dance practice. The teachers seemed busy, running from one classroom to another, making sure everyone knew what they had to do. When the music teacher entered her class one morning, he carried a small notepad. He told the students he wanted a quick update from each of them. One by one, the students shared what they had prepared. Some sang a couple of lines. Others clapped a rhythm. A few even asked if they could switch to an easier task. The teacher listened patiently, adjusting his list as he went along. When he reached her desk, he stopped and looked at her with a kind but slightly amused expression. "Are you ready with the simple piano melody?" he asked gently. She nodded without looking up. She didn't want her expression to reveal anything. She didn't want anyone to guess what she had been practicing at home. The teacher didn't question her further. He simply moved on to the next student. Once he left the room, a few students began whispering among themselves. They talked about how she had the easiest task. Some wondered if she would even manage that. She heard the whispers, not because they were loud, but because she was always aware of everything happening around her. But she stayed silent. Her silence protected her. It kept her true self hidden from people who didn't understand her. Later that afternoon, when she walked into the school hall for practice, the sound of instruments echoing across the room made her pause for a moment. There was a large stage at the front, decorated only with plain curtains for now. Chairs were arranged in rows for students who would be waiting for their turn. The piano was placed near the middle of the stage, a simple one. Not fancy like the ones she had seen in videos online, but enough to do what she needed. The teacher asked everyone to sit while he explained the order of performances. Her name was placed somewhere in the middle. Not too early, not too late. She would have time to watch how others performed before stepping onto the stage. As the practice session began, she watched her classmates try their parts. Some forgot their lines. Some made mistakes and laughed about it. No one was judged harshly. The atmosphere was relaxed and supportive. Everyone was simply trying to do their best. When her turn came for practice, she walked up to the piano slowly. The teacher smiled and handed her the sheet of the simple melody he had chosen for her. The notes on the paper looked almost too easy, like something a beginner would learn on the first day. She placed the paper on the stand, but she didn't really look at it. She already knew she wasn't going to use it. She pressed a few keys lightly to test their sound. Some keys felt slightly stiff, others faded, but it didn't bother her. She had practiced on a keyboard that was far older and more worn than this one. Her fingers knew how to adjust. She played the simple melody for the teacher, just as he had expected. Her movements were controlled, steady, and quiet. When she finished, the teacher nodded with approval. "Good," he said. "This will be perfect for you." Her classmates didn't pay much attention. Some were busy chatting. Others were thinking about their own parts. No one saw the skill behind her careful playing. No one noticed how steady her hands were, but she stepped down from the stage with a calm expression. She knew what she was truly preparing for. That evening, once she reached home, she slipped into her usual routine. She placed her backpack on the table, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat at the old keyboard. She ran her fingers across the keys, letting the sound fill the room. It was the one place where she never felt judged. She took a deep breath and began practicing the piece she had chosen for the event. It was fast, emotional, and full of complex transitions. She had picked it because it made her feel something she couldn't explain. It wasn't just about showing people she could play well. It was about expressing the part of her that she never shared with anyone. Hour after hour, She played the same parts again and again. The mistakes grew fewer. Her transitions became smoother. She practiced until she could feel every note before pressing it, until her hands moved almost on their own. There were moments when she stopped playing and stared at the keys, wondering what the teachers would think if they knew. Would they still see her as the quiet girl who couldn't do more than a simple melody? Would they be surprised, shocked, maybe even embarrassed for assuming so little about her? She didn't feel angry at them. She just wished people understood that being quiet didn't mean being incapable. As the event day got closer, the school felt even busier. Decorations were put up in the hallways. Posters were hung on the walls. Students practiced dances during lunch breaks. Teachers checked costumes and helped students with their lines. Every time the music teacher walked past her, he gave her a warm smile, still believing she would play something simple and short. He had no idea what she was planning. On the morning before the event, the entire school was buzzing with excitement. Students carried props and instruments. Some teachers tested microphones on the stage. A few students rehearsed their songs quietly in corners. She sat in her usual seat, looking out the window, letting her thoughts wander. She imagined herself sitting at the piano in front of hundreds of eyes. She imagined the sound of her first note echoing through the hall. She imagined the silence that would follow once people realized she wasn't playing the melody they expected. She felt nervous, but the nerves didn't scare her. They reminded her that she cared. During the final practice, the teacher gathered everyone in the hall. "Tomorrow is the big day," he announced. "Do your best. Don't worry about mistakes. Just enjoy it." Everyone clapped and cheered. The teacher then reminded them about the schedule and dismissed them early so they could rest at home. As she walked out of the hall that day, she paused for a moment and looked at the piano. It sat quietly in the center of the stage, waiting. She felt a strange connection to it, as if it understood everything she felt. She walked home with a steady pace. She wasn't rushing, but she wasn't dragging her feet either. Her mind was full of thoughts, some hopeful, some fearful. But she knew she was ready. That night, she practiced one last time. She didn't stop to fix mistakes. She didn't slow down to correct a rhythm. She just played from her heart, letting the music flow freely. When she finished, the room felt peaceful, almost like the air had softened. She sat quietly for a moment, her hands resting on her lap. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if people would understand her or if they would question her sudden change. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to hide any more. Before going to bed, she looked at the keyboard and felt a warm feeling inside. That old keyboard had been her only companion for years, the one place where she could express herself without fear. She turned off the lights and walked away slowly, her steps soundless as always. But deep inside, she carried something new, something brave, something true. Tomorrow, the stage would meet a version of her the world had never seen, and she was finally ready to show it. Part 3. The morning of the event arrived with a kind of quiet tension in the air. The whole school seemed more alive than usual. Students rushed around carrying costumes, props, and colorful decorations. Teachers moved from one corner to another, checking sound systems, adjusting the lights, and making sure everything would run smoothly. For her, the day felt different. She woke up earlier than usual and sat on the edge of her bed for a long moment, breathing slowly. She could feel her heart beating a little faster. She wasn't frightened, but she felt the weight of the moment she had been preparing for. Today, she wasn't just going to play a piano piece. She was going to show a part of herself she had kept hidden from everyone. When she got ready and left home, the sky was still soft with morning light. She walked quietly toward the school, her steps steady but thoughtful. She kept replaying the music in her mind, hearing each note as clearly as if she were sitting in front of her keyboard at home. Her fingers twitched slightly with the remembered movements as she entered the school gate. She saw groups of students talking excitedly. Some were practicing their dance steps right there in the courtyard. Others were carrying musical instruments or fixing their hair. A few were arguing over who would stand where during their performance. Everywhere she looked, there was movement and noise. She kept her head slightly lowered and walked toward her classroom. A few students glanced at her, but no one really paid attention. They were too focused on their own worries and excitement. Inside the classroom, her classmates were busier than she had ever seen them. Some were checking their costumes, some were testing small instruments, and others were pacing back and forth while whispering lines to themselves. The teacher entered soon after and told everyone to calm down. "We'll all go to the hall soon," the teacher said with a smile. "Remember, this is not a competition. Just enjoy your moment on stage." She listened quietly. The teacher's words were kind, but they didn't calm her nerves completely. She felt like she was carrying something much heavier than what others carried. They were preparing for performances everyone expected, but she was preparing for something no one knew was coming. After a short while, the teachers guided all the classes to the hall. The large room looked different from how it usually did. Bright lights were shining on the stage. Long curtains framed the sides. Rows of chairs filled the floor, waiting for the audience. Students were seated on one side while teachers took their places near the front. She sat quietly in the middle row with her classmates. From where she sat, she could clearly see the piano on the stage. Its simple form under the lights made it look softer than usual. She stared at it for a long moment. It felt like the piano was waiting for her. One by one, the performances began. The first group sang a cheerful song. Their voices were slightly shaky at first, but grew stronger as they continued. The audience clapped warmly. The next performance was a dance. A group of students moved in bright outfits, smiling through every step. Some forgot their places, but they laughed it off. As each group performed, she watched closely. She saw the excitement, the relief, the small mistakes, and the proud smiles afterward. The hall filled with applause, laughter, and cheers. With every performance that passed, her turn came closer. She could feel her palms grow slightly warm. Her heartbeat stayed steady but stronger than before. She kept her gaze fixed on the piano whenever she could. She imagined herself walking toward it. She imagined her hands touching the keys. The music teacher, who was helping manage the stage, looked relaxed and cheerful. He smiled at every student who performed. He clapped the loudest for those who looked nervous. He had no idea what she had prepared. He believed she would walk up and play the simple tune he had given her. After a few more performances, the teacher on the microphone announced the next act. "Next, we have a piano piece. A simple melody presented by one of our students." Her heart jumped at the sound of her name. She stood slowly, moving carefully, so her legs wouldn't show how tense she felt inside. Her classmates glanced at her briefly before returning to their conversations. They weren't expecting anything special. She walked toward the stage as if moving through a quiet dream. The lights felt warm on her face. The hall suddenly seemed much larger now that she stood in front of everyone. The music teacher met her at the steps and gave her an encouraging nod. "You'll do fine," he whispered. She nodded gently, though a part of her wanted to smile. If he knew what she was about to play, he might not have said those words so casually. She reached the piano and sat down on the small bench. The surface of the seat felt cool under her hands. She took a slow breath and placed her fingers on the keys, pressing softly at first, just to feel them again. The teacher had placed the sheet of the simple melody on the stand. She looked at it briefly. The notes looked almost childish compared to what she had practiced. Slowly, she reached forward and lowered the sheet, letting it rest against the stand. A few students in the audience glanced at each other, confused. The teachers didn't pay much attention yet. They thought she was just adjusting the sheet, but she knew exactly what she was doing. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. The hall felt silent, as if waiting. She inhaled softly, feeling every note she had practiced echo inside her mind. Then she began. Her first notes were gentle but confident. The hall, which had been buzzing with quiet whispers seconds earlier, fell suddenly still. Her fingers moved with a grace that didn't match her quiet personality. Each note connected smoothly with the next. Her hands moved faster than anyone expected. Students in the audience stopped talking. Teachers who were organizing the papers in front of them froze. The music teacher, who had been walking toward the backstage area, turned around instantly. She didn't see any of it. Her eyes stayed on the keys. Her mind and body worked together in perfect rhythm. She didn't think about who was watching. She didn't think about what she looked like. She only felt the music. The piece grew more intense as it moved forward. The notes rose and fell like waves. Her fingers danced across the keys with a confidence she never showed in her daily life. The hall stayed silent, completely drawn into the performance. A student in the front row leaned forward, eyes wide. Another whispered something softly, but even that whisper faded when they heard how smoothly she played. The teachers exchanged surprised glances. They looked at each other with expressions that silently asked the same question. How did we not know? The music teacher walked closer to the stage, his face showing shock mixed with pride. He had assumed she barely knew how to play. But this was something none of them had expected. As she reached the middle of the piece, her confidence grew. Her hands moved faster, her posture relaxed, and her focus sharpened. It was as if she had stepped out of her quiet world and into another one where she wasn't invisible. Even though she couldn't see the audience, she could feel their silence. It wasn't the uncomfortable kind. It was the kind that meant they were listening, truly listening. As the final notes approached, she slowed her movements gently, letting the melody soften like the fading of a deep breath. Her fingers pressed the last key with quiet strength. The moment she lifted her hands, the hall remained silent for a split second, long enough for her to wonder if she had made a mistake. Then the sound hit her. Applause. Loud, powerful applause that echoed through the hall and wrapped around her like a warm wave. Students stood up from their seats. Teachers clapped with wide smiles and wide eyes. Some even looked emotional. She blinked, unsure how to react. She had never been in the center of attention before. She didn't smile widely or raise her hands. She simply bowed her head softly, her heartbeat strong with a mix of relief and disbelief. As she stood from the piano bench, she saw the music teacher near the edge of the stage. His expression was full of pride, but also something else, a clear sense of realization. He had underestimated her. Everyone had. She stepped down from the stage, her steps gentle but filled with a new kind of energy. She didn't feel invisible anymore. She didn't feel small. For the first time, she felt like the world had finally heard the voice she never used. And all she had done was let her hands speak through the piano. He stood on the small balcony outside the practice hall, breathing in the cool evening air. The lights from the street below shimmered softly, broken occasionally by the passing glow of a bus or a cyclist's headlamp. He let out a slow breath, trying to calm the mixture of nerves and wonder still swirling inside him. The day had been heavier than expected, not just because of the performance practice, but because he had seen something in her music that he could not explain with ordinary words. He heard the door open behind him, light footsteps stepping onto the balcony floor. He didn't turn around at first. He somehow knew it was her. She walked up beside him, leaning her arms on the cool railing. She stayed silent for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. The soft hum of the night wrapped around them. "You left in a hurry," she finally said. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I just needed some air." "You're playing today." It was. "Something else." She smiled a little, not proud, but grateful. "I didn't expect it to come out like that. I just played what I felt." He turned his head toward her. "That's the thing. You always play what you feel. But today, it felt like you showed something you've been hiding for a long time. Something even you didn't know how to put into words." She looked down at her hands, rubbing her fingertips together. "I guess maybe that's true. I always told myself to stay simple, to never push too far. But when everyone was watching, something in me just opened. I didn't even think." The memory played in his mind. The room quieting. The crowd leaning forward without realizing it. Her hands moving across the keys, like she wasn't just playing music, she was speaking through it. How did it feel? He asked Dot. She took a long pause. It felt like the room wasn't even there. Like everything went soft. My heartbeat slowed. My hands moved on their own. It felt peaceful. He understood that feeling more than she knew. "That calm," he said softly. "It only comes when the music decides to trust you." She looked at him with curious eyes. "You think music trusts people?" "I think it trusts honesty. And today, you are honest without holding anything back. That's rare." She breathed out slowly, her breath creating a faint mist in the cool air. "Maybe, but honesty can be scary. It exposes too much. That's why it moves people," he replied. They stood in silence again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like both of them were still inside the echo of the melodies she had played earlier. Inside the hall, the faint sound of someone closing a piano lid reached them. Most people had already left, but the building still carried the warmth of lingering music. She straightened up from the railing. "You know," she said, "I didn't expect you to look so surprised. I thought you had seen everything by now." He laughed under his breath. "Believe me, I haven't. I mean, I knew you were good. Everyone knows that. But today, it wasn't just skill. There was depth. Real depth." She looked at him with a quiet expression, half thoughtful, half unsure. "Do you think the crowd noticed?" He shook his head slowly. "They didn't just notice. They felt it. You should have seen their faces. They went from curious to silent to almost stunned. You didn't just play music. You changed the air in the room." Her lips parted a little like she wanted to say something, but the words didn't form. Instead, she looked away, a soft warmth rising in her face. "I never thought I could do something like that," she murmured. He stepped a little closer without thinking. "You did it because you stopped trying so hard. You let it happen." For a moment, the only sound was the traffic down below and the distant hum of the city. The night wrapped around them like a quiet blanket. "So what now?" she asked softly. "Now," he said, "you keep going. You don't shrink yourself again." She hesitated. What if I can't do it again? What if today was just luck? It wasn't luck. It was you. And if you did it once, you can do it again. But don't chase it. Let it come naturally. She nodded slowly, almost as if making a promise to herself. The two of them walked back inside the hall. But instead of returning to the main room, they stepped into a smaller practice room with a single upright piano. The lights were dim, giving the room a warm glow. "Do you want to try again?" he asked. She looked at the piano, its keys reflecting the soft light. Not to impress anyone, just to feel what happened again. He moved to the side wall and leaned against it, watching quietly. She sat down, adjusted the bench, placed her fingers on the keys, and closed her eyes. Then she began. This time, the melody was gentler, almost like a whisper. It didn't have the power of her earlier performance, but it had warmth, a softness that made the room feel smaller, safer. Each note carried a calm breath, drifting through the air. He watched her closely, noticing how her shoulders relaxed, how her expression softened as the notes flowed. When she finished, she didn't open her eyes right away. She let the last note fade. "How did that feel?" he asked. "Different," she said quietly. "But good. Like I'm learning something about myself." "You are." She finally looked up, meeting his gaze. "Thank you for not letting me walk away scared." "You're the one who stayed," he replied. She smiled. Small but real. They stayed in the room a while longer, talking about simple things. How she practiced when she was young. How he first learned to listen to music instead of just playing it. How both of them carried memories tied to forgotten notes in quiet rooms. The night grew deeper outside. The building slowly dimmed as more lights were switched off. Eventually, she stood and stretched her arms. "I should head home before it gets too late." He nodded. "I'll walk you out." As they moved through the empty hallway, their footsteps echoing lightly, he felt something shifting. Not dramatic, not sudden, just a quiet sense that something had begun. Something neither of them had planned for. When they reached the door, she paused and looked back at him. "Tomorrow, will you listen again?" He smiled gently. "Of course." She nodded once, then stepped into the cool night, her figure blending softly into the glow of the streetlights. He watched her leave, feeling the quiet inside the hall settle around him. And he knew the story wasn't close to ending. Something was unfolding, something delicate, something real, and neither of them was running from it anymore. The moment the hall fell silent after her performance stayed inside her long after she walked off the stage. She could still feel the weight of every stare, every surprised expression, and every whisper of disbelief. For a girl who had spent most of her school life trying not to be noticed, a sudden burst of attention felt unreal. She kept her hands folded together as she stepped down, almost as if she was afraid the magic in her fingers would disappear if she moved too quickly. Students, who barely looked at her before, now watched her as she walked by. Some gave small smiles. Some looked shocked. And some just stared, unable to understand how someone they thought they knew could hide something so big. She felt her face warm, not out of embarrassment, but because for once she wasn't invisible. A group of teachers stood to the side of the stage, and the music teacher who once doubted her seemed frozen in place. Even from a distance, she could see that the expressions on their faces had completely changed. Earlier that day, many of them had assumed she would struggle with the simple melody they assigned. Now those same teachers were quietly arguing about who should speak to her first dot when she reached the edge of the hall. One teacher stepped toward her, the one who usually reminded her to pay more attention in class. His voice was soft for the first time as he asked her how long she had been practicing. She looked down, suddenly shy again, and answered in a quiet voice. The teacher's eyes widened. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss her answer. Instead, he nodded with genuine respect, something she had never received from him before. More students began gathering around her. They asked questions about how she learned, who taught her, and how long she had been playing. She didn't know how to handle so much attention. She wasn't used to explaining herself to anyone. But she answered their questions with small smiles, surprised that they cared enough to ask Dot while all of this happened. The hall remained filled with a strange feeling, a mix of excitement and confusion. It wasn't every day that someone completely changed how the whole school saw them in just a few minutes. Teachers who once shook their heads at her silence were now whispering about her talent, her control, and the emotion she brought into her performance. When the rest of the event ended and students began to leave, she stayed near the back of the hall, trying to avoid too much attention as she gathered her things. But even then, people came up to her. One student who used to mock her for being quiet actually told her she played beautifully. She didn't know how to respond. She had lived with those little comments for so long that hearing the same voice speak kindly felt strange. As she made her way outside, the fresh air helped her calm down. She took a deep breath, letting the cool wind touch her face. She had never imagined that a simple school performance would change her day like this. She walked slowly, trying to take in everything that had happened, as if her mind needed time to catch up. When she reached home, her family was waiting for her. They had known she had a performance that day, but they didn't know what happened yet. The moment she stepped inside, they noticed her bright eyes and the slight smile she couldn't hide. They knew something was different. When she finally told them what happened, how the teachers reacted, how the hall went silent, how everyone was shocked, her family listened carefully. They didn't look surprised. They always knew she had something special. They had seen her practice for hours, long after the rest of the house had gone quiet. They knew how much she loved the piano. Still, hearing that the outside world finally noticed her made them feel proud in a way they couldn't put into words. After dinner, she sat at the small keyboard in her room. The keys felt familiar, warm, and comforting. She played quietly, letting the notes fill the room. Even after the applause and the surprise from everyone at school, she didn't play to impress anyone. She simply played because it made her feel alive. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she had to hide her talent. She didn't feel like she had to downplay what she loved. She didn't feel like she had to stay in the back of the class anymore. The next day at school, things felt different the moment she walked through the gate. Students who usually walked past her without noticing gave her small nods or smiles. Some waved. A group near the entrance whispered excitedly when they saw her, but it didn't feel like the usual whispers. These whispers were filled with admiration. During the break, the music teacher called her to the staff room. She walked in nervously, expecting a long lecture or something formal. Instead, she found 3 teachers waiting for her with soft expressions. The music teacher asked her if she would like to join the school's advanced music group. Another teacher suggested she sign up for an upcoming local competition. She stood there quietly, unsure of what to say. The teachers didn't rush her. They waited. They spoke gently, showing the kind of patience she had never experienced from them before. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. When she finally said yes, the teachers exchanged happy looks. They promised to help her prepare, to guide her, and to support her. It felt strange to hear such encouraging words from people who once doubted her. But it also felt good. Later that day, she sat in the music room alone. The piano in the corner now felt like a friend waiting for her. She placed her hands on the keys and played a soft melody. The room filled with sound as she realized she no longer had to hide her skills. Her journey wasn't over. It was only beginning. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know which competitions she would join or how far her music would take her. But she knew one thing clearly. She wasn't the quiet, unnoticed girl in the back of the class anymore. Now she was the girl who stunned a hall full of people into silence. The girl whose hidden talent finally came to light. And the girl who, for the first time, felt proud of who she was. Her story became a reminder to everyone around her. Sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest gifts. And sometimes all it takes is one moment, one unexpected chance to show the world who you truly are. As she walked out of the music room that afternoon, she didn't feel small anymore. She didn't feel invisible. She felt ready for whatever came next.